Two-time F1 world champion Max Verstappen rewrote the history books in Mexico, with the Dutchman breaking the record for most victories in a season, now 14, with a chance to take it to 16. Verstappen also reset the record for most points scored in a season, with the 25-year-old now on 416 points, 3 more than Sir Lewis Hamilton scored in 2019 en route to his 7th title. It was the first time that Verstappen won in Mexico from pole position. Daniel Ricciardo starred in Mexico, but the soon-to-be free agent has yet to confirm his plans for next season, with a reserve role at one of the top teams, potentially Mercedes, his expected destination. The Australian, who will leave McLaren at the end of the season, was on hot form in Mexico, rising up to 7th on the soft tyres, despite contact with AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda in a botched passing attempt that ended the Japanese pilot's race. Ricciardo said he was puzzled by the return to form, but said spending a season on the sidelines in 2023 would be good for him. The way the seasons are, it's pretty relentless, he said. You don't really get a chance to rebuild. Charles Leclerc has described Ferrari's 2022 season as one of missed opportunities and many mistakes, and is keen to use the final races to make improvements for next year. 2022 began like a dream for the prancing horse, with a win in Bahrain for Leclerc. Second in Saudi Arabia was followed by another win in Australia that put him 46 points ahead of Red Bull rival Max Verstappen. But the Scuderia lost out on its title charges with mistakes, like at Imola, where Leclerc spun, and France, where he went into the barriers, and power unit forced DNFs in Spain and Baku. There were also strategic bungles at Silverstone, Hungary, and Belgium, and more recently tyre management issues which Leclerc once solved. It's been a frustrating season overall, but on the other hand, I'm pretty sure it will help us to get better in the future, he said. Sir Lewis Hamilton says he will hammer out a new multi-year deal with Mercedes over the next couple of months, ensuring that he sees out his F1 career with the Silver Arrows. Hamilton, who is on course to endure his maiden winless season in F1, is determined to help Mercedes make a comeback from next year, with the likelihood the 37-year-old will be racing into his 40s. My goal is to continue to be with Mercedes. I've been with Mercedes since I was 13, and it really is my family, he said. Hamilton's best result in 2022 has been second place, which he achieved in France, Hungary, the USA, and in Mexico last weekend. Red Bull put its 2021 cost cap breach behind it in Mexico, having agreed to the FIA's punishment that included a $7 million fine and a 10% reduction in CFD time for 12 months. Red Bull's sanction, which its rivals scoffed at, was the result of a 1.6% overspend, which could have been just 0.4% had a permitted tax credit been correctly filed. But veteran journalist Mark Hughes, in a chat with Australian Grand Prix podcast In the Fast Lane, says the financial regulations have been seen as something to interpret, like F1's technical regulations, and also hinted at why perhaps Red Bull went over.
These financial regulations only apply to 3 teams. They're set at such a level that nobody else was reaching them anyway. But 2 of those 3 teams have got bigger corporate responsibilities and image concerns than the other one.
Alfa Romeo driver Valtteri Bottas says he's considering a future switch to Indycar once his time in F1 comes to a close. Bottas is locked in with the Hinwil outfit until the end of the 2025 season, after which the squad will become Audi's works team. But while it's not yet known if Audi will go for an all-German lineup, the Finn is open to new challenges in motorsport. Indycar is quite interesting. The tracks are nice and the racing seems really real, he said. Mercedes says that Mexico's new front wing will be its last major upgrade for the season, but it may introduce smaller parts in Brazil and Abu Dhabi. The Silver Arrows held back from racing its latest front wing in Austin, as the second practice session was used as an extended test for Pirelli, but made its debut in Mexico last weekend.
That is our last major update, but there are always a string of new parts, smaller parts that we're looking at, either to get a small gain in performance. A lot of it at this stage of the year, though, is about learning for next year. So some of those test parts are really just trying to understand some of the development direction we want to go in.
The squad also reconfirmed its goal to beat rival Ferrari to second in the constructors' standings, despite third coming with more wind tunnel time.
Certainly third for us would just be nothing. The ATL would be a small consolation prize relative to the gain of being second in this year's championship.
Mexico's Grand Prix has been a huge hit since it returned to the calendar in 2015, with a new 3-year deal signed over the weekend to take the race through to 2025. But the Latin nation also announced that it's bidding to host the 2036 Olympic Games. Mexico has already been following the International Olympic Committee's now much lower cost guidelines to determine the viability of hosting, with the government only needing to contribute 10% of total expenses.
Since July 7th, Mexico has been considered by the International Olympic Committee to compete to be an Olympic host city. This letter was sent by Thomas Bach, where he writes that he's proud we have the support from the Foreign Ministry and the federal government of Mexico, led by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
The next confirmed Olympic host cities are Paris, France in 2024, marking its third time, 100 years after its first, which is followed by Los Angeles, California, and then Brisbane in Australia. Former Grand Prix driver Jan Magnuson says that his son Kevin is a lot more relaxed at Haas this season, after his recent experience outside F1 in sports car series IMSA and at Le Mans. Magnuson watched on with interest as his son returned to F1 and Haas this year, but said in an interview with the sports official podcast Beyond the Grid that Kevin learned a valuable lesson in America.
A lot of stuff has happened in his life. He's also had a taste of life outside of Formula One in America, in sports cars where life's good, it's fun, it's cool cars, great racing. And I think that's what he needed to do that, to, just like I needed to learn that there's life after Formula One.
Magnuson, who drove for McLaren and Stewart in F1 before a move to America and sports cars, helped his son navigate his career, but says his advice was aimed at reducing mistakes.
I can't say that I was ever 100% sure what would be the right way to do it, but I could tell him I did it like this, and that didn't work. Then there's a whole other set of opportunities or ways to do it, and pick one of those because this didn't work.
Former F1 driver Marcus Ericsson, a paddock veteran of 97 Grand Prix starts, has been immortalized in Indy 500 history, with the Swede's face added to the event's iconic 1.64-meter-tall Borg-Warner trophy. Ericsson won this year's edition of the blue-ribboned race and became the first Swede to do so since Kenny Brack in 1999. The face was designed by Will Behrens, who has been responsible for the sculptures since 1990, with Ericsson his 33rd face.
It looks amazing. It was just the whole process, like we talked about, like we saw there, being up in North Carolina, meeting Will and working with him was just super special, and seeing how he works a little bit was very impressive, and then seeing the end result and being on this trophy, it's just, I'm still pinching myself.
Thanks for watching. To stay up to speed on all things Formula One, make sure you hit the subscribe button.